You want to have some more FPS in your games and just some better performance from your graphics card overall. So you've come to the right place because I'm going to show you how to overclock your GPU. First things first, I'm just going to show you how to use MSI Afterburner. That's personally what I use when overclocking my graphics card, and I just find that's the most easiest program there is, and also shows you a lot of other features that I'm going to be talking about just in a minute. Alright, so the first thing you want to do is before you start overclocking your GPU, you want to, what I would recommend you do is you update your Windows to the latest version if you want to do that, and then definitely update your GPU drivers as well to the latest one. That will just ensure that there's the best stability in the games you play, and yeah, just the overall use of it. Then after you've updated all of your drivers and your Windows and all of that, I would actually suggest that you disconnect from the internet. So just unplug your Ethernet cable, or just pull out your Wi-Fi card if you can. Otherwise, just disable it in the settings, because it has happened to me that while I was overclocking, when I just restart my PC, there was a middle of the Windows update, and that caused some issues for me. Especially if you applied a overclock and then Windows tries to update and then it just fails. It's a nasty situation. You don't want to get into that. Alright, so after you've disconnected from your Wi-Fi, well, before you disconnect from your Wi-Fi, you might want to download MSI Afterburner and some sort of benchmark. The reason why you want to benchmark is just to, first of all, get just a baseline of where your GPU is now, basically in the form of a score at the end of the benchmark. It gives you some kind of score, and then also you have then a way to actually measure what kind of improvement you have if you overclock your GPU. So I would recommend something like Superposition or Heaven or one of those things, or 3D Mark even if you want to download that. Just download that and have that on your PC, and also MSI Afterburner. And if I remember, down in the description I'll leave all the links for MSI Afterburner if you. Alright, now you can see I'm on my computer. I am in, and I'm currently running MSI Afterburner. Alright, so over here you can see this is just the basic layout. Now you can change that. Actually, let me just reset mine to the defaults. So this is basically what you will see the first time when you open MSI Afterburner. So right over here you can see that this is just the GPU information, this is the driver information, and then we have some basic things like the core voltage, the core clock, power limit, memory clock, temp limit, and fan speed. And over here you can see a quick readout of what all of these things are. Alright, now if your voltage or something like that is not unlocked, you cannot move the slider, then all you need to do is come to the settings right here, and then right here you will be able to unlock the voltage control, unlock voltage monitoring, and all of that. And if you're running AMD GPU, there is options for that as well down here. Then let me just quickly go through the settings while we're here. Here you can set your fan controls. If you enable this, yeah, you can you just set your fan curve to whatever you want to. So yeah, if you just want like a nice steady fan curve, you can do something like this, and then you just always hit apply and then OK, and then it will apply. Alright, but I'm not going to use that for my graphics card because it's water cooled, so I don't need my GPU fans running. Oh, I don't have them installed in anyway. Right, then we have monitoring. Right here you select all of these, and this is just basically like the GPU temperature and usage and all of that. There's a whole list. You can go through all of that and select whichever ones you want, and that'll basically display down here. So I can quickly show you that as well. So down here you can see this is my GPU temperature, and this shows a graph of the temperature over time. I think this is like 10 minutes or something, and then you can go down here. So there's your core clock, memory clock. Here's my CPU temperature, CPU usage, clock speed, and all of that. So all of the information you select here, you will be able to see right down here. Right, and then there's just some other parameters as well you can set on here. There's on-screen display. So if you want this in the fan monitoring, you can set, for instance, let's say CPU power. You select that, and then you say show in on-screen display. So you select that, and then you'll see in OSD that little thing just appears there. and then on screen you can set that like a hotkey right there. And actually when you're inside of game and you press that hotkey, then it'll actually show you like an overlay of like what is the parameters that you've set in the previous window. So then you'll be able to see that, and that's actually really useful when you're playing games or such and you want to see just, well, what is my GPU temp or something like that. If you don't have a second monitor where you can put up MSI Afterburner or something like that, you just have one monitor, then having that always on-screen display in the corner of your screen somewhere, that is very helpful. Alright, this is benchmarking. I've never used that before, screen capturing, but yeah, user interface. This is the other thing that you might want to be interested in. So right here you can see this is all just the different skins and yeah, just the look of basically how it is. Here you can set like your time format, temperature format, language, and all of that. And yeah, down here you can just set the scaling and the transparency, yeah, just those basic settings, but you can go through it and on your own time to see everything there is. Alright, so coming back to the MSI Afterburner, what I normally do is the core voltage, power limit, and power temp, I just max that out by default and I apply that. Oh, just one thing before I forget this. Down here you'll see, or somewhere on screen you'll see a startup. Now in that mode, when it's like lit up, that means it's enabled, and when it's like just dull, that is disabled. Now you want to disable this because if you, let's say for instance on your memory clock you set in like a bad amount and the GPU cannot handle that when it's posting. If it posts and the GPU cannot handle whichever overclocks you did, it cannot handle that. It will get into a boot loop if you set this to set up to start with startup. So you definitely want to disable this. So let's say there is an instance where you've applied an overclock that is just ridiculous, it won't work. Then you can actually still boot into Windows as normal. You just uninstall MSI Afterburner and then you just reinstall it and then everything will be fine. So continuing with the overclock, what I normally recommend is just starting with your core clock. And this is very important. You only change one parameter at a time. So you use MSI Afterburner and you just, for instance, use the core clock and you give that an offset of, let's say, 50. And then you say apply and then you run your benchmark. And if it passes everything fine, then you can set it up to, let's say, 75 and then run it again until the point where it gets to it crashing. Let's say you go up to 110 and you say, oh well, it crashes there and I have to restart my PC and it doesn't want to use it. Well, just go down to 100 then and apply 100 and let that run and make sure that 100 is stable, but only change one parameter. So only change the core clock or only the memory clock. You just change one at a time. So with the core clock, I recommend going with increments. Like let's say for 15 is good, you just go to plus 15, then the next you say plus 30, and yeah, just so on until you get to a number which you know works for you. So on my graphics card, I've already gone through those steps and I have come to 100, which is stable on mine. Now one thing to notice is after you've changed it by 15, just run the benchmark. If you see that the benchmark makes it through the whole benchmark without crashing or any weird instability, that's good. Then you can turn it up 15 more. So I know 100 is good for me, and then my temps aren't getting anything ridiculous. My temps are still within comfortable temperatures that I like. So then I move on to memory overclocking, and then over here this is normally 0. But then you start, and with the memory I would recommend going with like increments of 50. So you'll see that the memory you'll be able to overclock much more than the core clock, and that is normal, especially on Nvidia cards. So yeah, I would recommend starting with 50 and then while keeping your core clock overclock as well. So in this case plus 100 megahertz. But this is just in my case. You might be saying, well, your graphics card can only take 80. Well, that's perfectly fine. That's still on 80 megahertz overclock you can get. And then you keep that 100, but then you apply on your memory clock a plus 50 as well. Alright, and after you've applied that plus 50, you run your benchmark. And after your benchmark has successfully completed, you can come back here and boost it up to 100. Sorry, not 10, 100. To 100. Alright, and after you've gone through the steps, you get to a point where it crashes. Then let's say you get all the way up to 350 and you see that crashes. Well, then you start going down, and I normally go down in increments of 10. So then I would apply 340 and run that and see if that passes. Alright, and once you get to a point where you've almost basically maxed out both your core clock and the memory clock, you would just apply that. So remember, every time when you change something here, so let's say you've changed that to 100, you have to apply it right here first, and then you run your benchmark. So in my case, I know my graphics card can take an core clock overclock of 100 and a memory of 600 because it's on water, so it's running cool enough to sustain these overclocks. So then I hit apply, and then even if you want to, you can save it as a profile. So you just hit the save icon and then whichever profile you want to save it to. So I already have 1 and 2 there, and yeah, that's basically it. And then after you have overclocked both your core clock and your memory clock, you just run your benchmark. I'll recommend running like 2 or 3 benchmarks back to back to see if it still crashes. And let's say you do run your second or third benchmark back to back, and you see, well, now my system is crashing. Then what I would recommend is you take your core clock, take another 10 off there, and then see if it still happens. If it still persists, then try the memory clock, take a 10 away there, and yeah, it's really just playing around with which one can lie and where it is really stable. So this process definitely won't take you like 10 minutes. Believe me, you can sit for literally hours or even days, like playing around with this, getting the sliders to where you want it, getting the proper overclock that you want. And yeah, so in the benchmark, definitely you'll see if it has a score. Normally it has, if you run the benchmark, at the end of it, it has like a score, like let's say 5,000 or 10,000 or whatever. And you always compare that to your baseline. So what I recommend is just take a piece of paper and just write down like baseline, and you write down your score, let's say 7,500, and then after you've done all the overclocking, you see, well, now I've increased it, it's 8,500. Well, that's really good if you have an improvement. And yeah, just one thing to remember is always check your temperatures and just see if that is, well, inside of what you feel comfortable with. So personally, what I don't feel comfortable if my temperatures go above 60 or that, it's perfectly fine still. You can check on Google just to see like what kind of temperatures your graphics card can still handle. Normally I think it's like 95 or 100, somewhere around there. The older cards might have a little bit lower max temperature, but yeah, my cards, especially this GPU that's running on water, it's cool all the time and I don't have to worry about it. So yeah, that's where I'm comfortable with it. And the last thing I would recommend is after you have done all your overclocking, is going into the game that you know that you play is the most demanding. So I know everyone has that one game that is really demanding. Your GPU temperatures are just really high and it's working really hard. I recommend going into that game and playing it a little bit with your overclocks to see if your GPU is stable. And then if not, I would also just recommend start by just taking away 10 or maybe even 5 at a time. First core clock, then memory, or first memory, then core clock, whichever way. Just play around with the sliders until you find a place where you're comfortable with the results and the temperatures and all of that. Yeah, so that is basically that, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Next video I'll be showing you how to overclock your CPU. That's much more fun and much more interesting because you have to go into the BIOS for that. But yeah, that's next week's video. So thank you for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember to like, subscribe and comment, and also share this with all your friends, and see you in the next video. Bye bye. Versace on my wrist, baby, make a wish. You could sell your Rari, but you can't afford my outfit. Versace on my wrist, baby.